This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
It kind of got more and more aggressive. Leah was getting dragged about a lot, and then there was a lot of blood in the water. And she got taken under, and that was when I really went, what do I do now? Because I couldn't even see her because the water had become so dirty. And luckily, she popped up, and the shark had let her go.
Were you scared of sharks?
Yeah. I've always been fearful of sharks. Not as scared as my dad is of sharks. He's very protective of his family in that sense.
Hello and welcome back to You're Going to Want to Hear This, the Marie Claire podcast where ordinary people share extraordinary stories. I'm your host, the editor of Marie Claire, Georgie McCourt. Now, there is a famous quote that I love from Nelson Mandela, and he says, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." It is such a great quote, and it's such a simple truth. Now, on the topic of courage, I want you to imagine being in the ocean, being in the water, and hearing terrified swimmers around you yell out shark. I want you to imagine paddling your board towards that danger. I think that act is so incredibly brave, we almost need a new word for it. My guest today is Charlie Verco, and that is exactly the situation that confronted him at Sydney's Coogee Beach when he rescued a young mum and local teacher called Leah Stewart. She was being attacked by a shark, and instead of swimming into the shore, he swam towards her and he brought her back to shore. It gives me goosebumps, and so will this conversation. Let's meet Charlie Verco.
So I was paddling. I'd set off from Bondi with a couple of people I'd actually pretty much just met from Wollongong that are also training for the race. And so there was a little convoy of us, as well as my dad on a surf ski. And we were aiming to do a 3-hour paddle. So we'd just gone to Maroubra and we're heading back to Bondi. And we're about halfway through. And during a lot of these paddles, especially this time of year when it's a bit flatter, less wind, you just hug the coast as much as you can, and it gets a little bit freaky when you're going around the back of the cliffs and there's no one around. This day was just such a perfect day that I felt pretty comfortable, plus I had people around me. And we even had the dads of the other people I was paddling with had a jet ski, so it was kind of as much comfort as you can get out there. But even when you're doing that, when you come into Coogee, that's the part where you feel most relaxed because you're close to the sand, there's so many people around. And I paddled in and the water was crystal clear, really blue. It was really warm for that time of year. There was no wind. And I was just paddling through all the swimmers. It was quite bright in the sun, so my main focus at that point in time was not running over a swimmer on my big board. That's hard to negotiate. And once I came into the bay, I was about 80 metres offshore, and about 100 metres ahead of me, there was a group of 3 women, and one of them started screaming shark. I actually met with the person who originally saw the shark this week, and she said that she felt the shark before she saw it. It actually brushed up against her and she thought it was a dolphin. So that's another bit of the story that's pretty insane to think about.
Oh my gosh, she felt it?
Yeah, she felt it, was looking around at it and saw the tail and then figured out it was a shark and started yelling. And as I said, I was about 100 metres away, so quite far away at this point. And most of the time when you're in the water and someone screams shark, it's not a shark. It'll be some kids playing a prank on their mates or someone that saw a dolphin and reacted a little bit too quickly, which I've definitely done a few times in my life. So at that point, you're always on edge when someone's screaming, but I hadn't thought there was any real danger. There was a couple of people near me that heard the screaming, and I thought we were quite close to shore, so I assumed that they'd just swim in, but they wanted to be out of the water as quickly as they could, and I was the nearest thing to get them out of the water. And I could see at this point there was definitely a clear shadow in the water, and the screaming had gone on for long enough where I was like, this is not a false call of shark. And I had to go to these people, you guys have got to swim in. We're not that far from shore, and I've got to check these guys are right. They're right next to the shark. And
how many people were out there next to the shark?
Yeah, that's the kind of details that I don't have a clear grasp on. I definitely know there were 3 really close to it. So the girl who initially saw the shark and her friend who were swimming together, and then Leah, who was out doing the swim on her own. There was 1 or 2 that were closer to me. In terms of the whole beach, I don't know, I didn't really capture that information. But as I started paddling over closer, I could see this thing, and it was moving really slowly and almost inquisitively. And my interactions with sharks, usually you go, if you can see it and it's moving in a relaxed manner, you feel pretty safe because 1, you know to get out of the water, and 2, if they don't want to be seen, they won't be seen, kind of thing. And so I thought the shark would kind of figure out that they weren't a seal, they weren't food, and move on. And about halfway on my paddle towards them, where I just thought I was going to be going over, picking up on my board, and it would be a bit of a fright and get them to the beach, that was when it actually started pushing Leah around, and I went, okay, this is a pretty different situation, something I've never been in before.
So when you say pushing her around, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's really hard because it was all underwater and I wasn't right next to it to say what happened. Obviously, she definitely got bitten at one point, but I don't know how much of it was, as I mentioned, the first girl who saw it said the shark just brushed up against her. So how much of it was just inquiring as to what these people were. But yeah, I could definitely see her getting moved around, and there was already so much panic. I don't know if it had initially bitten her at that point, but it definitely escalated from there.
Oh my God. I mean, that most people would freeze in a situation like that, but you didn't. You paddled towards her. What was going through your head? Because you started seeing blood and you saw that she had been bitten. Like, what were you thinking?
I spend a lot of time in the water, as I mentioned, and
Typically, what has been your interaction with them previously?
funnily enough, I'd never seen one whilst paddling on that board, and I've spent a lot of time on that board going up and down the coast.
That's incredible.
Which is so weird, but I've seen plenty of sharks just through other training experiences, being out surfing, and then we spend a lot of time up the coast in a fishing village where there's just so much more wildlife that there's local shark nests and you see them coming across the bay all the time. But most of my interactions had either been small sharks that you'd kind of go, okay, that doesn't really bother me as long as I'm on a big craft, I wouldn't swim with them. Or you just see it and get out of the water as quickly as you can, and you try and reduce the risk so you wouldn't go out when there's massive bait balls or at sunset, although I kind of break that rule a lot of the time if the surf's good. And yeah, all my interactions had been where the sharks had been acting pretty docile. So that was, a complete situation change once that it actually started acting aggressively. I guess what was going through my head is initially I thought whenever I've thought about what would happen if I was in a shark attack, it's just something that goes through your mind when you're spending a lot of time in the water, is that if I was on a big craft like mine, that I'd be able to paddle over towards it, and just the presence of something as big as I'm on an 18-foot board would just scare off the shark. And when I saw the shark come out of the water a little bit, surfaced, I could see its dorsal fin and its back and its tail, and felt like I was looking up at the shark, and the size of it and the power just made me realize that this thing's not going to be scared of me. And that changed the situation a lot in my head. I guess the previous examples in my head, it would have been a smaller shark. But at the same time, I still felt somewhat of an obligation to be there because I was the only person nearby that was on a craft. Everyone else was swimming, and it was amazing how quickly the water just felt empty as well. It feels like you were out there for a long time. I had no gauge of how long the whole scenario took. But I kept paddling towards her, hoping that I would be able to do something. And when the attack was going on, I realised that paddling in there and interrupting what was going on wasn't an option, because that would just be putting myself under unnecessary risk. And, well, frankly, I was too scared to, I guess.
Yeah.
So I started looking around for the guy on the jet ski, and they were on different boards, so they were quite a way behind me at this point. They were not an option. And so I just started signalling to the lifeguards, trying to get their attention, get the shark alarm on, because it felt like so long before the shark alarm went off. Clear the water, and maybe they could get a power craft or an armada of people on boards, essentially. Something that could just scare this thing off, because I felt like I was, as I said, not going to impact this shark's state of mind at all. I was just going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Obviously, all I wanted to do was go to the shore. And yeah, just kind of battling against that obligation of, like, if I go in, there'll be no one here and she'll be on her own.
How did it feel being close to such a powerful animal? Because I always feel, I love swimming in the ocean and I swim in the ocean a lot, but we are so vulnerable. I always feel vulnerable in the ocean, and that's the risk that you take, and it is a small risk. How did it feel being so close to, like, such, because it was a big shark?
Yeah, it's, once the situation changed from there just being a shark in the water, which is something I was pretty familiar with, to there was an attack going on, I felt pretty helpless, especially seeing the size of the shark and knowing that, just seeing its behaviour, knowing that this thing's not going to care about me being there. Whenever I'd previously seen sharks you go, there's a fright, and then you get out of the water and you feel safe, and then you can kind of admire how smoothly they move through the water and just how impressive an animal they are. And I've always had the respect for the fact that it is their home. We can't be
And it
upset
is,
that
it's
they
their
come through.
playground.
Yeah.
Like, that's the attitude I have when I go into the ocean. It's
Sure.
their home.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of my job to reduce the risks when I can. But on this day, it seemed like the risks were as low as you could get. And coming back to just seeing an animal that powerful, it was just shocking, I guess. I don't have any great words to describe it. It completely changed my state of mind and felt like there was nothing I could do, despite being not a small person and on a really big piece of equipment. I just knew that it wouldn't care.
So I always laugh when people say, oh, you're supposed to punch a shark in the face. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good in theory, but it's a little harder when you're in the water.
Yeah, I like to think of that as only an option once I'm in its mouth kind of option. I'm not going to go actively up and try and punch it.
No, definitely not.
There's a lot of people, you hear divers especially, talk about looking at the shark and keeping your eyes on it. And there definitely are people out there that have had so many interactions with shark, the people that just free dive with them all the time, that can recognize the differences in behavior and know when they're just curious and know how to prevent aggressiveness. But I don't think I'd ever be in that calm of a state of mind to make that kind of decision. I think if I was in the worst case scenario, definitely I'd like to think that I'd start going for the nose or the gills or the eyes, but I don't ever want to be in that situation.
No. So what happened next?
It kind of got more and more aggressive. Leah was getting dragged about a lot, and then there was a lot of blood in the water, and she got taken under, and that was when I really went, what do I do now? I couldn't even see her because the water had become so dirty. And luckily she popped up and the shark had let her go. And that was, in that moment, I kind of assumed that it had figured out she wasn't food and left her alone. Since then, I've had some conversations with shark experts to kind of learn that was naive, but I think that was good to be naive in that moment. And I started paddling towards Leah, and I actually stopped paddling towards her and got her to swim a couple of meters to me because I didn't want to be in the middle of the blood where I couldn't see underneath me.
Yes.
Because that was the scariest thing to me at that point. If I could at least see if the shark was coming, I could put myself behind the board or something like that. And so I got her to just grab the nose of my board. It's a long board, so it meant I didn't have to go right into the middle of the scene, and just started paddling backwards, dragging her to shore. I'm not on a rescue craft, so this thing is really long and slender and not very agile. It takes me like 30 seconds to turn this thing around, let alone there being another person involved. I've got a drink bottle cage and a rudder with a tiller, so I probably couldn't control it or get her on the board if she was strong enough to, let alone the fact that I don't think she was strong enough to get on the board. Because we were so close to the beach, I just started paddling her backwards, trying to drag her. And she became too weak to hold the nose, so I paddled back up to her and got her to hold the drink bottle cage, which is something easier to grip onto, which worked for quite a way of the way in. But again, she became too weak, and so I had to just go and grab her by the arm and hold her head out of the water, paddling backwards with one arm until she lost consciousness, and I had to just keep dragging her to the beach until I could stand and just get her out of the water.
I can't imagine what was going through your mind. Like, when she lost consciousness, did you feel panic? Did you feel adrenaline? Both?
Reflecting on the moment, your brain becomes pretty simple when there's that much stress involved. I kind of only really had two thoughts, which was, where's this shark? I want to get myself out of the water and just get Leah to shore, because in the back of my head, because of the training I've had through Surf Lifesaving, you know what you could be doing to help in that moment to stop blood loss or that kind of thing, make it go faster if we had to paddle for further. But just because of the context, I couldn't do those things and also get it to shore. So I was just going, get to the beach as fast as you can. There'll be people there that can help. I'll be actually able to do more in terms of first aid if we were on the sand. And so those were just kind of the two thoughts in my head. And then once she was before she was unconscious and she was right next to me, I did have a quick glimpse at her injuries, and it was confronting, and I just almost put it out of my mind and went, this isn't important right now, and just didn't look at it, just focus on getting to the beach. And I tried to say a few things to her so she had something else to think about, but they felt pretty meaningless at the time. It was just anything that came into my head. It was things like, we're almost to shore, just keep breathing, keep your head out of the water. And then I guess it's almost a habit from doing coaching in the water, just saying you're doing a good job, which upon reflection feels like a stupid thing to say.
No, I think that's the right thing to say, because, I mean, she is, like, to even hold on to the board. And
I thought so too, in the fact that she was, once she popped up and the shark had let her go, she was in a pretty extensive state of shock, but she was able to say help and respond to instructions at that point in time. And that, to me, was pretty impressive. I don't think I would have been able to do that.
more of Charlie Verco's incredible story soon. I'll be back in a moment. No, yeah, it's just, the whole thing is so surreal. When you think about all your training in the water and all your experience in the water, and then going through something like this, what elements from your training do you think helped you?
Yeah, I think there's two major parts. The training you get through surf lifesaving to become a volunteer lifeguard is pretty impressive. You, from the SRC when you're about 13, I'm pretty sure, you learn basic first aid and CPR, and then that becomes more advanced once you do your bronze. And they renew your skills every year, giving you more up-to-date research on what the best thing to do in these situations are. And it just gets you thinking about, if something was going wrong, what you actually can do in that situation. You never feel confident when that's happening. So I think it was great that it built up that state of mind of feeling like there was something I could do to help in that moment. And the other part of it is that the surf club and just being around the ocean just fostered my love for the ocean, which meant that I spent so much time out there that you kind of run these scenarios through in your head, and it never goes the way you think in your head, and you're never thinking as rationally as you are in that moment in time. But it just kind of put me straight into a mind of what I can do to help, as opposed to just get to the beach. It just kind of paused that instinct for a second. And yeah, another factor I think that contributes to that as well is doing surf lifesaving. I also compete through surf lifesaving in my Ironman stuff, and that's a pretty important part of my life. And it sounds silly to say, but because it's so important to me and I work so hard towards goals in that, you learn how to perform and think rationally when you're under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And those skills definitely did transfer, because it meant that I was able to go, yes, I'm really scared, yes, I've got a lot of adrenaline, but I was still able to make decisions. And I think, yeah, that on top of the fact that being in the water that much, having the skills so ingrained into me that I didn't have to even have a thought about being worried about my own safety in terms of the water. The only thing in the water that I was scared of was the shark. I didn't have to be worried about being physically capable enough to get her to the beach, or being able to negotiate a board, all that kind of stuff. I think there's so many different factors that contributed to my decision making, and I think a lot of them, the good ones, I can owe to my upbringing through surf lifesaving, through sport, and just being by the ocean.
And fitness. Did you see the shark again, or it had gone underwater?
I didn't see it again, but that's purely, I think, because it was so dirty in the water. What I did learn from the shark expert is that it's pretty common for great whites to come in with a seal, for example, and take off the flippers so they can't swim, and then just inflict as much damage as they can, so that the seal is essentially going to die, and they can retreat away for their own safety and then come in once that can't fight back anymore. And so that is essentially what the shark expert thought had happened in this scenario, and why the shark left. So my dad was on a ski a couple 100 meters ahead of me and got to shore, and then the friends came in on the jet ski, and once they were all safe, they went back out on the jet ski and let's go find this thing. And when they found the shark, it saw the jet ski and just did a 90-degree turn and came up and looked at them to go, "Where's my food?" Thinking it was, it's food that had just attacked, I guess.
Wow.
But no, I didn't see it.
You brought Leah onto the shore, and then obviously help was there. What happened after that? How were you feeling?
Yeah, So I was very much in a state of mind of just get her to the beach and a lot of my stress had just been going into that. So I was really lucky that when I got to the beach, there was lifeguards that came out into the water to help me. They helped me with the last little bit of the paddle. And then when we could stand, they just grabbed Leah's legs and I was able to grab her torso, and there was heaps of people just helping get her up onto the sand. And because it was such a busy day at Coogee, there was police on scene, there was all the council lifeguards ready to go, but there was also medical professionals and other surf lifesavers on the beach that were on the sand whilst I was dragging her in and had taken that time to prepare what they're going to do and thought through of how they were going to execute it. And so when I put Leah on the ground, I was able to put pressure on her leg to try and prevent a bit of the bleeding while they put the tourniquets on that were all ready to go. And then from then I could just see how much more prepared and honestly how much more training these people had had than me, and felt comfortable that I could step back and let them take over and collect my thoughts, because there was so many people there available to help and ready to go. And by the time I came back to the scene and had I took a second to myself and made sure I was all right, I was happy with how I was going, went and checked that my dad was all right, the other people I was paddling with were all right, and then checking on the swimmers that were right next to Leah when the attack was going on. I went back over and just tried to hold up a board for a bit of privacy, and they had Leah conscious again. So it just shows that the training they had and the confidence they had was so impressive, and the skills they were able to execute under a high pressure environment.
You must, I mean, I would have been shaking. I can't imagine how you were feeling back on the sand. Leah was conscious. It must still feel surreal.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a normal state of mind, but I've spent a lot of my life being scared of things, and I've spent a lot of my life managing high arousal environments, be that through racing or just training and having to push myself to go out and surf that I was scared of.
Were you scared of sharks?
Yeah, I've always been fearful of sharks. Not as scared as my dad is of sharks. He's very protective of his family in that sense, and he hates them. So he was the one who would always yell at me when I was out surfing at sunset. Even when now I'm 25 and I go, Dad, I need to be responsible for my own decisions. And he goes, no, I don't care. You get out of the surf. But it meant that I was pretty comfortable being in a state where I had such high adrenaline. So I could go, okay, that part's just normal. It would be weird if I wasn't feeling like that. And then I could think, okay, I'm thinking rationally, and it was a confronting situation, but I am not in a traumatized state. So I just knew the adrenaline would pass, and yeah, essentially it'd been lucky that I've had an upbringing that had set me up to deal with that state of mind. And yeah, I definitely did get the shakes once I'd taken 1 or 2 minutes to calm down and go back over to the scene and do what I could to help from there. I was holding up a board and just had my right leg trembling just because of the amount of adrenaline going through me. But I think the biggest benefit of that is that I just wasn't scared of that happening. I just knew that was normal and that it would go away. And I think it's been intense the week following. It's been a lot of discussions, a lot of the same discussions, but getting to tell the story a lot has made me very comfortable with reliving it. And it's also kept me busy, so I could kind of buffer time a little bit for having those extensive time alone with my thoughts where a lot of replays of the situation go on. And I just have a clear way of processing it.
How do you feel about the ocean now? Because, we have seen an increase in shark attacks, and, Instagram, constantly serves us footage of sharks in the water, and it does create this fear amongst people, and yet Australians have this love of the ocean. What is your attitude to the water, and how do you feel about swimming and being in the ocean now?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been a thematic change in my social media over the last week. Just
I can't imagine your social media, because my social media is like serving me so much shark footage.
It's almost desensitized me to the sharks just by seeing them every time I open my phone now. I've also tried not to be on my phone.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of messages of support, and I just wanted to make sure I could reach out to all those properly. And so I just was like, I'm going to put it away until I've got the time to actually go and respond to all these messages. But in terms of the ocean, it's always been something I've thought about, and I've done a lot of long paddles out in open ocean. Sometimes there's been some pretty hairy scenarios where I had blown up on a paddle and was limping my way home while the sun was setting and there was massive swell, and just kind of scary situations where you run through
would feel
scenarios
very
in your head
small in those moments. Like, they're the moments when nature, you realise how insignificant we are.
Absolutely, yeah. And you just kind of have to control your thoughts and just go, you're going to get there. You have no real control of what happens between you and getting there, but you're going to get there. But yeah, it's something I've always been considerate of. And going back into the water, it was nice that I had Dad going through a similar scenario. So he came back and paddled with me for my first paddle last Monday. And I didn't feel any more skittish when I was in the water. I didn't feel nervous before the paddle because I feel really comfortable having someone around me. And I changed the environment a little bit more. I'm just a lot more cautious now. And I'll build back into being as comfortable as I was, I hope. But I went and did it at Manly, which is another really busy beach. I stayed in the bay between Shelley and Manly, so it wasn't around the back of the cliffs where I feel a little bit less safe. And yeah, I didn't jump anymore at the little chops that look like shark fins that I already had. So I'm glad that this hasn't taken away my love for the ocean, and it's definitely made me more aware of how much things can go wrong even when you don't expect them to. But I think I already had a pretty good awareness of that, and I think it's just made me a little bit more diligent on making decisions correctly.
It is the risk that we take, but it's like, you don't want Australians to lose their love of the ocean.
Not at all.
It's part of our country. You have spoken about better shark safety measures and also urged Australians to donate blood. Why were those two messages important to you?
So the first one of the shark safety measures, I've tried to be pretty stern on the fact that I'm definitely not educated enough in the subject to have a strong opinion on it. But I do think something does need to be done to reduce the risk at the moment and make us feel a lot safer, because Australian beaches are such an important part of our culture, especially for me. The water is my whole lifestyle. And it did feel like this particular example was preventable by measures that already exist. The drone technology I've seen up and down the beaches on different parts of the East Coast. And this was such a clear day on such a busy beach, and there were just restrictions that prevented there from being drones that day, which I imagine there's good reason for. I know there's an airport nearby that has a massive factor to consider. But I was shocked to think that a shark this big on such a clear day, that even someone on the cliffs didn't see it come in. And it was, having a drone up, you would have seen it in an instant and been able to set off the alarm. And so I think drones are a pretty harmless measure that can do a lot, in my opinion. But in terms of an actual solution that's going to make a real difference, I think the people that do understand the subject need to come out with something that is going to make an impact, because there's been more shark attacks in the last year that I can remember in Australia.
There really have. We never used to hear about them. And now I feel like we hear about them, a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely feels like there's a lot more activity.
Being called a hero, that must feel weird. What has happened? Obviously, it's incredibly tragic, but it shows that humans are innately good, right? Like the fact that you paddled in, like there's so much evil in the world, but then there you are in the ocean, and there's a woman who needs your help, and there's this huge, powerful shark, and instead of swimming away, you swim into her. And that to me just speaks to how innately good humans really are, and there's so much kindness in the world. How do you feel when people call you a hero? What does that feel like?
Thank you for the kind words. It's an awkward subject to talk on. When the hero word gets thrown around, I feel like there's always a bit of imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm very grateful for the actions I did take on the day. At the same time, there's always thoughts in my mind of what else I could have done to help out. In my definition of a hero in my head, I think is a lot more of a long-term time horizon of someone that repeatedly puts the benefit of other people over their own. I feel like I was a lot more right place, right time, and lucky that I had the skills and the equipment to actually be able to do something. I don't really feel like that's an appropriate definition, but I was pretty grateful that I was able to do something in the moment.
Well, not everyone would stay in the water. That's a lot of people would swim out. So she's incredibly, incredibly lucky. The name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This. So my last question is, what is one message that you want people to hear, I guess, about swimming in the ocean? Because as we spoke about earlier, there is a lot of fear around swimming in the sea.
I think it has so much more opportunity to provide joy than it can to cause horrific incidents like this. I know that it's definitely shaped the person I am today, and I'm pretty happy with the person I am. It's the thing that at the end of every day is usually the best part of my day. It provides me with confidence to try and get better at something, whether that be my sport or just negotiating the waves. It challenges me, and I think facing challenges is such an important part of being able to manage having a healthy and enjoyable life, because you're always going to face challenges, and you have to essentially train to do that, if I was to use a sport word to compare it. And I think, it's definitely an example of the importance of surf safety and the importance of making good decisions and being educated on the best way to appreciate the ocean. But I think this should definitely not steer anyone away from wanting to learn to swim, learn to paddle, learn to be a lifesaver, learn to be able to help others, but also learn to be able to enjoy what I think is Australia's best asset, which is the beaches. And if there was one more thing I could talk about as well, about the donating blood, is that when I put Leah onto the sand, I don't want to be too graphic, but I wasn't very optimistic at that point in time. And to be able to see what the paramedics and all of the medical trained people were able to do to get her breathing before she was able to leave the beach, just shows how important it is the programs like donating blood are, because without that blood, it would probably be a very different scenario right now. And so when someone from the hospital reached out to me and asked if I could use just the current profile that I had at the moment to get that message out there, I felt really honoured that I could have an impact. And when I did a really small post where I was speaking to the camera for about 20 seconds. I kind of rushed it because I had a mate over for dinner that I was trying to catch up with. I felt like I'd been neglecting my friends for the previous few days. But to see how well received that message was and the difference that could make made me really proud of the impact I could have. And just being in a situation like this showed the importance of it. So yeah, if you are able to go out and donate blood, especially if you are O negative, because that's the blood that they use in these as their emergency reserves, that would be another big message I want to get across.
It's so important. I lost a lot of blood after the birth of my second child, and it wasn't until I had 5 blood transfusions, which is a huge amount of blood.
Wow.
I hadn't realised the importance of donating blood. It's like everyone should donate blood, because when people need it, they really need it. And it's just such a good message.
Yeah, thank you.
Charlie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And that is Charlie Verco with the most incredible story of the day. He rescued a woman at Coogee Beach who had been mauled by a great white shark. I genuinely cannot imagine the gut-wrenching fear one would feel in that situation. It's our worst nightmare, and what an incredible human. It really just reminds me, as I mentioned in the podcast, we are all innately good and kind, and I'm just blown away by what Charlie did. For more stories of style and substance from Marie Claire, make sure to follow You're Going to Want to Hear This on your favourite podcast app. And if you prefer to watch in high definition, you can subscribe to Marie Claire's YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss an episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next week.